Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Entropy podcast. I'm your host, Francis Gorman, and this is episode 10. If you're enjoying our content, I'd really appreciate it if you can like and follow the show wherever it is you get your podcast from. Today's guest has one of the most unusual and true life stories you'll ever hear. Jack Barsky, born Albrecht Dittrich in East Germany in 1949, was a KGB sleeper agent sent to operate deep undercover in the United States during the Cold War. His journey is a powerful story of espionage, dual identities, and ultimately defection. Today, he's gone from a secret life as a Soviet spy to mentoring Fortune 500 executives. Jack is a renowned keynote speaker and also authored his memoir in 2017, Deep Undercover. Jack, it's my absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, I'm delighted to be talking with you again, and I know it's going to be good as long as my throat holds up.
Don't worry about it, Jack. I think after all these years, your throat is doing perfectly fine. Jack, could you bring to life maybe some of your backstory? When I heard about it first, I was like, this is something of the movies, but you've lived it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. The people, and my book has been read by thousands of, like, several, couple, 300,000 people, and I get this feedback a lot. It reads like a movie. Okay, well, it isn't. I lived it, and I clearly did not design it. I never even wanted. I never had a thought that I would one day become a spy. I was going to be a college professor. Okay, that's in my blood. Teaching. My parents were both teachers, and then people made a suggestion. They came to me. The KGB came to me, and they just said hello. And I, curious as I am, that's part of one of my character traits. I'm infinitely curious about everything and everybody. So I was, and they were just talking and, like, wanted to have a relationship with me. There was not a recruitment, mind you, that was getting to know me. It took them 18 months to actually make the offer. And up until that point, up until the offer came, I was just toying with the idea. I didn't take it seriously. I think that it sounds really interesting, adventurous, and I get to go to the West and take advantage of the Western standard of living, and also we had our own version of James Bond. Every Christmas there was an episode of a series called The Invisible Visor, and it was about an East German spy who went to West Germany undercover as a Nazi hunter, and he also lived a good life. He drove the fancy cars, he lived in great homes, and most importantly, he got the girl. So that's all I knew about espionage, and a little bit of what the East German news media let out, because we had our heroes of, like, communist spies. And the biggest hero that we had in East Germany was Richard Sorge, who was working for the KGB as a German journalist who had connection with the Nazis, but he worked in Japan and got a phenomenal amount of really valuable intelligence to Stalin, who idiotically rejected it. So, I'm going to stop right here. So anyway, I am I got to a point where I was recruited, and at that point I had to make a decision, and it wasn't that easy. So, I had this great career ahead of me. I was going to join the intellectual elite in the town where the university was, and I was going to get paid pretty well. Yeah, I was arrogant as hell in those days because I aced everything that I pretty much got A's in every subject that I took, and I also got a national scholarship that was, and I kid you not, I double checked that information, that was limited to 100 concurrent holders in the entire country. So, man, I was so full of myself, and I was going to live the great life in East Germany, and I was a communist, but the adventure and the good life, and then maybe all the girls that were waiting for me. And fundamentally, when I say fundamentally, the yes that I said had to have a foundation in ideology. And I was a 100% communist because I knew this would be dangerous. I knew I was a good chance that I was going to wind up in jail. And you don't sign up for something like this on like that unless you know that you're serving a higher cause and not just selfish pursuit. So I said yes, and I got altogether 5 years of training. And 5 years after I said yes, I was deployed to the United States, spent 10 years in the US operating as primarily as a sleeper, became fully Americanized, maybe not fully, but good enough in New York City to pass for a born American because the Jack Barsky identity was stolen from a young boy who passed away at the age of 11. So, yeah, 10 years, went to college again, got a degree in business with a concentration on computer technology. And then I joined the workforce, and I was still, while I joined the workforce as a professional, I was still reporting back to the KGB, and that stopped in 1988. I got to tell you why, because some people might. There's people who don't know it. I don't want to be arrogant enough that everybody knows my story. It wasn't because I quit the KGB in 1988. They wanted me back home because they had reason to believe that I was going to be arrested soon. So they communicated that to me. They said, "You got to come home, emergency, big danger." And what they didn't know was that at the time I had a daughter living with me and her mother. That gets too much. This backstory gets too long. Anybody's interested how that all happened, they need to read the book. So anyway, I had this daughter, and I was just so deeply in love with this child. There's something, an emotion I'd never felt before. I mean, it was this unconditional love where you give and you don't want anything back. The only thing that she could give me back was a smile. And I hadn't found a way to support her once I'm back on the other side of the Iron Curtain. I couldn't ask the KGB to help me; they would have put me in jail for disobeying orders, right? And I couldn't have asked any of my American friends to help out. I would have given myself away, so I had no clue what to do. Well, again, go to the book, back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, I decided to stay and told him so. Now I can, this is a spoiler alert. People ask, how do you quit the KGB? Normally you don't, but if you are a really good liar, you get away with it because I told him I had contracted HIV/AIDS. And that, the moment, I guarantee you, I didn't know it then, but now I know it in hindsight. I guarantee you, the moment they read this passage in my letter in secret writing, they immediately said, we don't want him back because it was a very infectious, incurable disease at the time. So they told my German family that I had passed away. That was a lie, but they just told, they wiped me out, gave them a little bit of my dollar savings. I guarantee you, not everything. My son knows that his mother got some money, but he forgot how much. I guarantee you, the courier took some for himself because it's all done in cash and espionage. And so my German name Albrecht Dittrich is listed as having passed away in 1988 in the German personnel register, whatever it's called. So that's my backstory, and ever since then I the FBI caught up with me. I cooperated. I became a citizen, and I worked on my version of the American dream. I had a great career in corporate America, great career, starting as a programmer, going all the way to chief information officer, and all of these jobs were in altogether six Fortune 500 companies that operated in 6 different cities and 3 different industries. So I got to know a lot and had to just gather a lot of experience what it's like to operate in corporate, all the characters that operating in corporate, and I learned from everybody else because I, as you may or have concluded already, I'm an extrovert. I can also listen very well, but right now you asked me to talk, so shut me up, please.
I was letting you run, Jack, because it's all fascinating stuff. I have to ask, when you made that decision to come clean to the FBI, etc., you were announced deceased in your own country. Was that hard? That part of your identity therefore no longer existed, but you still walked the earth. Was that a hard decision to make? You've left your homeland behind.
No,
What
that
what? A,
well, the decision that I made had nothing to do with the FBI. The FBI contacted me 9 years later, and
oh,
at that point there was only one decision: hey, I'm all yours. The hard decision was when I told the KGB I'm not coming. There was no FBI involved. There was no counterintelligence involved. The driving force was my daughter Chelsea, and this is why I tell people whether they want to hear it or not. I think it sounds like such a trite sentence, 3 words: love conquers all. Well, I lived through it because everything that was good for me personally was on the other side of the Iron Curtain. If I had not lied to them and gone back, I would have been welcome as a hero. I got a decoration. It's called the Order of the Red Banner 2 years before. That was the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union. That was only uh, awarded to highly regarded spies. And I met two of them personally, the Cohens, Lana and Morris Cohens, who were members of the Rosenberg spy ring. So apparently, I did well enough impersonating an American and doing what I had to do to be to be a functioning American, just in case I had to be woken up as a sleeper. And apparently, also, that's a guess that a lot of the others that they sent out failed at that task. So I would have gone back, and I had dollar savings in the East that would have been uh, I would have they would have made me a wealthy man. They promised me a house, so everything that was good for me was over there. The only
so
thing that was good for me staying was Chelsea. That's it. And then there was the danger of being arrested by the FBI or the KGB interpreting my resignation as a defection, and that added more danger. And guess what? You look at the equation, there's only one possible, reasonable decision to make. You got to leave. You got to leave. And on top of it, I had an excuse. I could have rationalized. If I stay and the FBI catches me, I'm no good for my kids anyway. For my kid anyway, right? So love conquers all, and I can't take credit for it. It attacked me. Okay.
uh, it made the decision for you, Jack. In terms of that, so as you've just disclosed, you basically had a 9 year window. Where did you live a normal life? Were you always
Oh
looking
yeah,
over your shoulder? Was there fear
yeah.
there
No,
of?
I took surveillance detection measures and some other measures to figure out whether the FBI was uh, observing, watching me, and that I did that for about 3 months. There was not a sign, and I got confirmation that they didn't have a clue I existed. And I also made sure for the same period of time that I was not reliably found at the same time at the same spot and I tell you why, and it makes a lot of sense even to lay people. You know, if an assassination has to be planned, you can't just go follow somebody and shoot them. You need to do it where you have an escape for yourself. So you gotta check where the person reliably shows up and see and find the best spot to do that. And I didn't give him if they had planned something like that. Didn't give him that chance. So I was, and this is not training. This is just a lot of logic and thinking about and putting yourself. It's called empathy. Putting yourself into the shoes of the would-be assassin, right? So anyway, after 3 months, I said to the mother of Chelsea, my daughter, all right, get ready. I'm going to save money now, and within a year we're going to buy a home in the suburbs, and that's what we did. And that is when I started my version of the American dream. I bought property that made me a capitalist, right? And then I had this really focused on my career. We had another child, a son. We went from one house to another house to what I call the Mac Mansion with a pool and a $10,000 chandelier. I mean, I was doing exceedingly well, and it became sort of normal. Except at one point, the FBI showed up. That sort of shook me for at the moment when they said hello. That it was like, oh, and I can't say the word. It's the S word. Oh, shoot! Because immediately when the agent came up to me, it was at a bridge crossing over the Delaware where you had to. It was a toll bridge. You had to slow down, stop, put some coin in a slot so the gate would open, and there they had uh, a policeman stationed who told me to just move over to the side, routine traffic stop, and asked me to get out of the car. At that point, I should have already, if I was still suspicious and watchful, I would have known he was lying. There's no such thing as a routine traffic stop with asking somebody to get out of the car. Anyway, I just got out, and the agents came. The agent came for me in civilian clothes from the right, back from the right, and flipped an ID, and I knew exactly what that meant.
And did that
Boom.
moment shatter Chelsea's mother's world, or did she know that you were a sleeper agent
She
and you
had
had
no.
broken
Oh,
away?
yeah, she did. This
Were
is
you,
this
were
is
you in
part of
big
the.
trouble, Jack? Were you in big trouble when that happened, or was she aware?
This is another one of those delicious parts of my story that I have nothing to do with engineering, other than some of my actions resulted in interesting situations. So, my wife, Chelsea's mother, and I had a hard time getting along. She was very jealous. She thought I had affairs all over the place, which I didn't, and she got angry and argumentative. And at one point, I just figured, I used what I call the nuclear option, and I told her, "Hey, listen, this is my background. This is what I risk to stay with you and Chelsea. You think I want to have an affair with another woman? I love you. We are on the same team." Well, it didn't work because now she knew that I was a consummate liar. She didn't believe me at all. And then B, the FBI had a bug in my kitchen. And while I
Oh,
was telling her about my background, there was somebody in the FBI office listening to my confession. And that's when they introduced themselves a couple of weeks later.
okay. Caught in a domestic argument. That's after all of the due diligence. Jack,
Yeah.
you talked a lot about you were obviously a very intelligent young man, and you were studying chemistry, and you could have pursued a different career path. But how much does emotional intelligence have to play into this, and what role did that play in your success then when you moved into the world of technology?
That's a really, really good question. And I know now that I had a very high emotional IQ. I just use the word empathy. I don't necessarily feel people's pain, but I sense it, and I can, to the extent I can do something to help him, I can. I can understand what makes other people tick. When I was young, I didn't know any of that, but I tell you, the KGB was looking for people like that, and that's why they uh, studied me for 18 months. Okay, they had a list of character traits that they were looking for, and just the ability to understand others, to read people, and take advantage of that read was absolutely critical. So I was never aware of it until, I say, maybe 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I found myself single again. Unfortunately, my beloved ex-wife Shauna, who I still love, and she loves me back, but she told me she can't stand living with me anymore. So here I am all by myself. But that gave me an opportunity to first of all, I got on a lot more podcasts because I had the time. Got a lot of questions, and then I also wrote a master class. I wrote everything that I learned in my life. I wrote this down, and which required me to do a lot of introspection and a lot of this with this situation and that situation. And I realized that, yeah, I do have a very high emotional IQ, and that was confirmed recently by a neurologist, by a scientist. And if you don't mind, I can name the
Sure. Yeah.
personality test that he developed. His first name is Antoine, but the personality test is called Meet Yourself, and that is the only personality test in existence today that includes genetic analysis. And I scored very high in empathy. Not a surprise anymore, but I have evidence that I'm not deluded. Okay.
That's really interesting. Genetic ties as well there.
Yeah.
So Jack, in terms of all of those facets, you've you've lived multiple lives in your lifespan to date. Then you enter the corporate world.
Yeah.
Technology is your preference,
Uh-huh.
uh, and I've seen on your posts and different podcasts where you talk about the power of silence, and
Yeah.
there's always this concept of the loudest voice in the room is the weakest voice in the room. Can you talk a bit about the importance of silence in owning an
Yeah. Well,
audience or
first
an
of all,
argument?
I was a really good technologist. I was a top-notch programmer. But again, my curiosity, my empathy, my my number one love language is to serve. So how can I help you? And all of that uh, helped me manage information technology without being a technologist. And I'll tell you how that happened. My very first real rock solid important job was to fix an infrastructure team at United Healthcare that was in a phenomenal crisis. In those days, United Healthcare was top notch. They used the most advanced technology, and in Minneapolis, there were other technology companies, and they were raiding that team. That was the infrastructure team. If that fails, the company goes belly up. And a now good friend of mine, by the initials of the JP, somehow he found me as a manager in MetLife when we were gobbled up. Part of MetLife was gobbled up by United Healthcare. He found me, and he had the knowledge, the sixth sense that I could fix that team. So I went over there naked. All I had was my personality, nothing else. The technology, none of the technology that they were working with, I had ever been even close to, and uh, I, I didn't know their business model. and didn't know anybody there. So I had to to create relationships with the folks that were working there. I had to figure out the evil forces that I was dealing with, because there were senior executives who actually didn't mind. They didn't understand the value that this infrastructure team had, and they were treating them like garbage. Okay, and so I had to deal with hostility. I had to deal with senior staff meetings. Uh, I once uh, interrupted a senior staff meeting because I thought it was the right thing to do, uh, to give the corporate CIO. I mean, this was a big shot. Uh, an understanding of the urgency, I asked him to sign a requisition for something. So, and I that job I learned how to manage uh, using my people skills, and I actually made sure that I learned more, that I improved my people skills. I can now read people within, and no matter what we're talking about, this is a stranger that I meet, and it takes about maybe a minute. No matter the subject, I can come up with at least a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I don't read minds, but I can determine whether it's a quality person or not. Am I 100%? No, but 95% is pretty darn good, and I have proof for that as well, because in my last 3 years as an executive, I interviewed a lot of job applicants, and my interviews were non-traditional. They were fundamentally just talks. So, you have a dog, what kind of a dog it is. We talk a little bit about, a bunch of things, never about the job and what you know, and what you think of this job and why did you leave. None of that. And my instincts hired about close to 100 people based, and they all worked out with the exception of one. Everyone worked out, and I'm not lying to myself. Uh, I had a phenomenal record with regard to the interviewing process. At one point I had a boss who required me to interview all the candidates that were supposed to report to her that also would have been peers of mine. Okay, so and I said it worked out except for one case when I allowed my logical mind and my wishful thinking override my gut. There's this guy who came, I talked with, and my gut said within 30 seconds, I don't like him because he was just unpleasant. I don't like him. That was it. But he had a skill set that was sorely needed. And I rationalized that he was just one of those nerds who has who has no manners. So what I did is I hired him, and I let him do what he does best, and I shielded him from senior management because I knew would he just wasn't likable. Well, he became employee of the year because of me helping him and having shielding him from exposure. And then a few months later, he went to the CEO, who was my direct boss, and made a case that I should be fired.
Well, that was nice of him, wasn't it?
So that gives you an idea how logic, and I say this in some of my posts, logic very often misfires because there are circumstances that you're not aware of that play into the logic that you apply based on what you know. I'm not against logic. I'm a logical thinker, but I have learned to trust my gut, my instincts, because your nervous system is learning all the time, particularly your subconscious. As you are consciously and deliberately interacting with other people and study them, the subconscious uh, create, builds a database of avatars of people you that you can recognize without even thinking about it. Okay, and again, this is not this is my amateurish approach to it. I came up with this idea until I had the chance to talk with psychologists and neurologists, and they agree with me with that thinking. So if you are if you have lived a reasonably long, deliberate life and have been very observant, if that's you, I will tell you, trust your gut and verify. You know, eventually, I've made a couple of gut-based decisions that went haywire, and I should have had a contract with the individual who stabbed me in the back. But some people are really, really good liars. Sociopaths and psychopaths, they can defeat lie detector tests, and they will defeat me as well. So you gotta trust your gut, but still verify.
Trust but verify. A key zero trust principle from Fadi Dowd on my last episode. So we'll take that one as a principle for life as well as technology. Jack, you're now helping Fortune 500 CEOs deal with the problems of today. Is there patterns you see emerging from that space? Their high pressure environments, those men and women.
Yeah,
they're
it's
leading
not just
large companies.
CEOs. I'm talking about the senior management team.
Senior managers
And
across the board.
well, the pattern is number one. Nobody. There are exceptions. Let me take that back. I have to be careful with absolutes that may well be okay in marketing, but not in our conversation. But the majority of corporate players that I have witnessed were inauthentic. They played a role. Okay, and the role that they played had to do with preserving what they have. Not because there's always politics in hierarchies, right? So if you are at the top or near the top, that you could lose it all. So you play the role that you think that will allow you to keep what you got, or the opposite, the flip side of the coin, go up the ladder. And there's this this behind kissing going on and all kinds. True friendships, that like human to human friendships within the corporate hierarchy, are next to impossible, because nobody will open themselves up to somebody that they most likely know that they can't trust. So and you throw into this behavior and this attitude, you throw in the fear factor. I have been in the presence of so many senior executives who actually exuded that fear that they have. And fear is a really, really bad foundation for decision making. Now, not bragging again, as I told you, I operated and I was hired by altogether 6 companies into management positions. And I was a new guy, right? And the pattern never changed. When I first started, everybody called me a breath of fresh air because I wasn't playing, I was being me. And over time, and particularly, I was hired to fix something. So they let me do what I do best, which is crisis management. I also do good project management, but what I do best was crisis management, and I enjoyed it. When they let me do what I do best, and also since I wasn't stepping on their toes, I was the breath of fresh air and the one who was fixing things, the big problem. And then when the things were fixed and we went into steady state management, the air got a little stale because now I I didn't change my behavior. I now was suggesting improvements with regard to how we operated to do better, make more money, and make people happy. But that stepped on people's toes. So the air got stale, and eventually it became a stink. And at that point, I was laid off a couple of times because I was a misfit. I didn't play the role that I was supposed to play. And uh, and what was I going to say? Oh, I got laid off a couple of times, and I quit proactively a couple of other times. I'm just, I can't step out of myself. It makes me uncomfortable. And so um, authenticity is a huge, very powerful tool, but you need to understand the culture of the company in which you can be authentic. I've served under authentic, or totally authentic CEOs. That shows gives a message to the layers and the pyramid down the layers that doesn't necessarily make everybody else authentic. Okay, so it's just really something. These are situations that you cannot apply with where you cannot apply uh, pre-canned solutions. It's every situation is different. Every human being is his own or her own character. Every situation is different. So that is why what I do is when I talk about mentoring, I talk about uh, um, situational mentoring. Deal with the situation as it arises, analyze the situation, and then make the right decisions. Analyzing and include your gut in the analysis. And again, there's science behind that. Uh, this is learning while doing. Uh, there's a type of learning that's called experiential learning. That is one of the most known schools that practices that is the Waldorf School. And I wanted to have my child to enter that school, but it just didn't work out. But experiential learning is proven in all matters to be uh, uh, more effective than school class based learning. So, in other words, and I'm learning while I'm teaching as well. So, I learned as a student while I learned while teaching, but again, I'm practicing like a subsection of experiential learning. We deal with the situation as it arises, and as you maneuver through that situation with talents and skills that you have, you keep that for your future, and that helps you mature and become overall much more aligned with yourself. You get to know yourself really well. That makes you more certain of yourself, which is it's an upward spiral, and your life, your business life, and even your personal life will be more fulfilling. I'm not a magic man, but I tell you, I got there fundamentally that way. And I thank the KGB that didn't teach me how to be. They threw me in the water and told me, figure it out, figure out how to swim.
Figure out how to swim. Jack, that's really insightful. And I've just one last question to finish on. You do a lot of keynote speaking. For anyone starting out in that space, it's always a daunting experience to stand in front of a crowd, to
Yeah.
talk your experiences, to bring across insights, and to own the room. What advice have you got for people who are maybe thinking of standing on that stage, or
All
who
right.
are on that stage already but struggling with owning
Right.
the audience?
First of all, again, learn by doing. If you're totally new to this and you're not a natural talent, and most of us are not, stage fright is I think, the number the two fear that people have right after dying. Uh, so you got to start simple. The first time I spoke to an audience was a middle school class. Okay, and I talked to them in a language that they understood. I used a video game, the Mario Brothers video game, to teach a lesson, and that worked really well. And then I uh, talked to an audience of about 50, and more than half of them I knew by first name. And I thought it was terrible, except my story that carried me. But I looked at a tape, and it was just horrible. And I hated it. But then I got invitations to speak someplace else, and I'm not a giver upper. Persistence and resilience is part of my genetic makeup. So I accepted those, and I have a tape of my first paid engagement, and that was pretty bad too. But here's the thing: what carried me was my story. Storytelling is absolutely key. People will always listen to a story. Everybody has a story. And a lot of people that I meet, they just want to know about mine. I want to know about theirs, because people aren't aware that they have a story, they have something to talk about. And very important is you talk to the audience. You just like almost think you're talking to only about a bunch of family members, and use emotions. Don't lecture. I started lecturing too much, like a college professor. Nowadays, I've learned to embrace my own emotions, and that I have quite a few, every which way, except for anger. I banned anger from my repertoire of emotions. But that's all I can tell you. Practice makes better. I I was not a talented speaker. The first time I gave a presentation in a corporate setting, my boss took me aside, and it was all about technical stuff. It was about a project that I was the technical lead of. And she took me into her office, and I quote from memory, and this memory will stick with me forever. She said, "Jack, you sucked." So she sent me to a Carnegie course where there's a little bit of public speaking that's being taught. And this is when I had the courage to speak to the students in my daughter's middle school class. It's You can learn this. There's some things you can't learn, like because it's certain inborn traits, but speaking is not necessarily just a talent. Some people are talented to speak, but I was not, and I'm doing really well. I have a halting speech pattern, and occasionally some words I have to fish for them, but it's okay. As long as when you feel that you made a mistake, as long as you just sort of then dig yourself a hole and lose the physical presence and become a shrinking violet. Just embrace your mistake, make a joke if you can. Oh, by the way, make them laugh. The first thing that I do these days, uh, I always tell a joke, and it's not a joke, a rabbi and a priest, that kind of a joke. It's something that actually the audience might be able to appreciate. And my favorite was I gave a talk at the National Symposium of Mensa. Okay, there was a keynote. So I get on stage, and I addressed them, "Hello, smart people." That for them it was a joke. Everybody laughed. Okay.
It is meant to.
And it was a compliment, and it was done light-heartedly. It wasn't kissing butt.
Jack, that is stay true to yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Own the stage, own your mistakes, and learn
Yes.
from them. I think there's a lot of messages there that everyone can take away.
Yeah. Don't play a role. Be yourself.
Be yourself.
And if you're naturally not funny at all, then don't do the joke thing, because there's nothing worse than crickets.
Or do the joke and then you'll have the hole. That's totally the way to dig yourself back out again.
But again, the point I'm trying to make, a lot of things can be learned if you're persistent, and it can be really, really depressing, and make you wanting to give up. There's points in life where you know that you have to give up, but most people give up way too soon, because success is just around the corner. And I'm the reason that I can state that and not be a hollow, empty, motivational speaker is that I went through that. I just gave you the example of speaking, and the same thing had to do with a lot of other things. There's a lot of things you can learn, and I also talked about learning how to read people rather quickly. That takes time. Anyway, where's my turn off button? I don't have it.
Yeah, turn Jack off. Well, look, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I think we're up on time. There's really valuable insights there for the listeners to chew back on and let percolate in their mind. But it was a personal pleasure to have you on.
And thank you for a lot of questions that I had. I had never been asked, and they're not necessarily just about, what's the transition from, agent to normal life, and most people just don't touch that, because, as I mentioned, I learned a lot from quote unquote normal life too, and so that is how it relates to others, because I can't, I'm no. Not too many people can become undercover intelligence agents.
Surely not, and I think it's getting more complex in the world we live in today. But,
absolutely.
Look, Jack, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks a million for coming on the Entropy podcast, and maybe we'll chat again soon. I'm sure you have another book in the hopper. You seem to be.
I got to come visit your country again. My favorite non-U.S. country.
I will commit to buying the beers the next time you're over.
Okay, all right. All right, Jameson, please.
Jameson. Oh, we could do Jameson. We can do the factory tour.
Well,
Perfect.
It was great. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you very much.